Now, like a lot of you, I just, I tried. Gandhi says you try everything you can. You give talks, you lobby, you go to the media, you vigil, you fast, you have prayer services, interfaith prayer services, you build coalitions, you get petitions. Gandhi said he'd organized more petitions than he thought than anyone in the whole world. You try everything legal, and sooner or later, the more you look at reality, you cross the line into illegal activity to resist systemic injustice, and that's what led me to the life of crime. And now I'm completely notorious, and I have a problem with recidivism, repeated jailings. And so my friends and I started, like many of you, just organizing countless demonstrations. And I've been arrested about 75 times around the country. And I'll just tell you briefly the story of one time, my most notorious, dangerous crime, when with Philip Berrigan and two friends, December 1993, we walked illegally under the Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in Goldsboro, North Carolina, the cutting edge of the U.S. Air Force, where they have the F-15E nuclear-capable fighter bomber. They were on alert to bomb Bosnia. They'd been used in the First Gulf War. We walked, there's this big sign that says, "Trespassers will be shot on sight." Because that's the thing. When you're messing around with nuclear weapons, the response is kill these people. And Dr. King is saying, what are you willing to die for? So we walked past the sign, through the woods, through a creek, up a hill, and there was a bluff with the whole Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. It was like 3 JFK airports. Enormous. 75 of these huge fighter bombers and thousands of people milling around at 4 in the morning. We thought, the place was going to be empty. And Phil Berrigan leaned over to me and he said, while we sleep, the war machine barrels on full steam in our navy. What do? Isaiah said someday these crazy people are going to come along and beat their swords and their plowshares and study war no more. And Jesus gave us that great ultimate commandment, most revolutionary words ever said: love your enemies, don't nuke them. So we walked straight ahead into the military base, and we each pulled out a little tiny hammer and went up to the side of an F-15, and we hammered once on it, trying to beat it into swords in the clash. It didn't even make a dent on it, and kind of swinging back like that. And, here's this big fighter bomber, and suddenly there's 5 soldiers with machine guns aimed at us. Ours was the 60th Plowshares Disarmament Action, and I had prepared for this action for 10 years. Every weekend in the year previously, because we were thinking someday they're going to open fire on us. We should be ready for that. And so I was to be the spokesperson of a group of 4, and so here are the soldiers with machine guns. And so I took a deep breath, put the hammers down on the ground. I took a deep breath, and I said, "We're unarmed, peaceful people. We mean you no harm. We're just here to dismantle this weapon of death." Perfectly reasonable request, we thought. As I always say, I love our naivete in the peace movement, where you think that the soldiers are going to go, "Oh, what were we thinking? Go right ahead, dismantle. Good thing you guys are here." If we were sane, that would be the response. But instead, of course, they threw us down on the ground. At least you can't do that, and they had the machine guns aimed at our head. And then there were like 10 soldiers, and then 25 soldiers, and they were kicking us, and then the machine guns aimed at us. And there were 50 soldiers, and then 100 soldiers, and then 200 soldiers, and then 500 soldiers, and then 1,000 soldiers around us. And they shut down the war games for the eastern half of the United States that we had strolled right into the middle of. Very exciting, I always say, about my life in the peace movement. For that act, I was found guilty of 2 felony charges and faced 20 years in prison, and ended up doing about 9 months in a tiny jail cell about the size of that piano with Philip Berrigan. We never went outdoors except for 3 days. Food came through the door and all. And then I was under house arrest for a year at the Jesuit community in D.C., which I thought was cruel and inhuman punishment. And it was terrible. Reading about Gandhi and Dr. King's giving. If you ever heard that great speech he gave in Detroit, he says, "We will enter the jail cell and transform it from a dungeon of despair into a haven of hope and harmony." And I'm looking around going, I don't think so. Phil Berrigan, and it was really powerful experience. And yet every day we read read from the scriptures, we broke bread. We get Wonder Bread for breakfast. And on Mondays, a little plastic cup of grape juice, which we found if you hid in the toilet over a week, it ferments quite nicely. We broke the bread and passed the cup, and it was like God was right in the cell with us. And I offer this to you for your reflection. As Elizabeth McAllister talks about the mystical experience of freedom in prison in pursuit of justice and peace. So, I could talk for hours. I wrote one of my books all about it. And, I always say that, the church doesn't take me seriously. My family doesn't take me seriously. Don't even get me started about how the Jesuits don't take me seriously. The media doesn't take me seriously. But the government takes me very seriously. Because the government knows that you've got priests and nuns and grandparents and students and ordinary people like us walking on the military bases in a spirit of steadfast nonviolence and love, insisting on the truth of disarmament, saying, go ahead, put me in jail, even kill me. But we're dismantling these weapons. They've got a problem, and they've got to nip that thing in the bud. And this is how the contagion of nonviolence spreads, as we're willing to give our lives. And I'm learning the hard lesson, as Paul alluded to this morning. You study the movements of social change. The abolitionists, crazy people, saying we're going to abolish slavery. The women, crazy suffragettes, insisting they have the right to vote. The labor movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the environmental movement. In the end, positive social change for justice and peace comes about, unfortunately, when good people break bad laws and accept the consequences, I think. When we risk ourselves, when we are really going to say, this is the core work for the rest of our lives, the greatest thing we can do with our lives, to defend our sisters and brothers, to sacrifice ourselves in the struggle for justice and peace, to use Christian language, to enter into the Paschal mystery, to risk the cross and risk resurrection. This is where I am with this struggle. So I just, my journey is trying to constantly challenge myself, not just to talk about nonviolence, but to practice it. And to be with good friends like you on this difficult journey. And I thought, listening to Paul's talk this morning, I think what is happening to us finally, maybe I'm wrong, but is we are going to have to undergo what the movements for social change in South Africa had to suffer through, and El Salvador, where it's going to cost us and it's going to hurt. And how much do we care for peace and justice? So in New Mexico, I showed up in one of my churches, and I'm just saying, I'm pretty bland. I was up at preaching saying, Jesus says love one another and love your enemies, so we're not going to bomb Iraq. Well, I freaked out. And one entire church would just scream and yell at me, all my parishioners. And then they went to the Archbishop, and I was kicked out. I lost that church. It was a total scandal in New Mexico. Someone asked you about, churches. I've had 25 years of working in nonviolence. And it was hard. It hurts. Because the whole point of being a pastor is we're going to reconcile everybody, unite everybody. We're going to have a nice time following Jesus. That's the whole point. And if you say, but you just aren't allowed to kill, all hell breaks out. Because literally one person said after communion, I'm in my priestly robes, I'm sitting back, oh, can't we kill somebody? I gotta kill somebody. It was like crying, I just gotta kill him. That's what I'm talking about, this addiction. And so why should any priest or minister speak out? They don't have any training in this. And I understand Jesus' statement now for the first time after 25 years of that. He says, I'm not come to bring peace, but division. And I think it's a lament. I haven't come to bring peace. I get my whole life thinking I'm going to bring peace. And all I'm doing in my presence is divisive. And that's the way it's going to be with all of us. And that's the sign we're getting somewhere. Daniel Berrigan says a good peace movement starts out small and gets smaller. Think of Jesus on the cross, then everybody's getting but if you go deep into the truth of the action, leave the outcome in the hands of the God of peace, the whole world